The autumn breeze rustled through the upscale district of Morton Heights as Sarah Chen adjusted her worn denim jacket and checked her reflection in a store window. Gone were her signature red lipstick and designer clothes that millions of viewers associated with her hit show Hidden Plates. Instead, she wore minimal makeup, thrifted jeans, and scuffed sneakers, the perfect disguise for an undercover restaurant review. The golden plate stood proudly on the corner of 5th and Madison, its brass fixtures gleaming in the afternoon sun. Sarah smiled, noting how the restaurant's exterior matched its pretentious reputation. Through the window, she could see white tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, and servers in pressed black uniforms attending to well-dressed patrons. As she pushed open the heavy oak door, a small bell chimed overhead. The maitre d' looked up from his reservation book, his welcoming smile faltering as he took in her appearance. Sarah felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, the excitement of being undercover, mixed with curiosity about how she would be treated. James Barrett, the owner, was making his rounds among the tables when Sarah entered. His tall frame was wrapped in an expensive charcoal suit, and his silver hair was perfectly coiffed. He prided himself on personally greeting distinguished guests, but today his eyes merely slid past Sarah, as if she were invisible. "I'd like a table for one, please," Sarah said softly, maintaining the slight Mandarin accent she often used when undercover. The maitre d' exchanged a glance with James, who had now stationed himself behind the host's stand. "Do you have a reservation?" James asked, his tone clipped. The restaurant was only half full. Sarah had deliberately chosen the awkward time between lunch and dinner service, and at least 8 tables stood empty. "No, sir," Sarah replied, pulling out her phone as if to check the time. In reality, she was already recording notes about the initial reception. Her trained eye caught everything. The whispered comments between servers, the way other diners were trying not to stare, and most importantly, the calculating look in James Barrett's eyes. "I'm afraid we're fully committed this afternoon," James said, making a show of studying his reservation book. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the casual dining establishments a few blocks over. There's a charming little noodle shop that might suit your tastes." Sarah noticed a young server wince at James's words. The server, whose name tag read Emily, shot Sarah an apologetic look before quickly busying herself with polishing already clean glasses. "I'm happy to wait," Sarah persisted, her voice pleasant but firm. "Your Wagyu beef carpaccio received quite a mention in last month's Food and Wine magazine. I've been eager to try it." James's eyebrows rose slightly at her knowledge of his menu's flagship dish, but his demeanor remained cold. He gestured to a small bench in the corner, partially hidden behind a large potted plant. "You may wait here, though I must warn you, our prices reflect our exceptional quality." As Sarah took her seat, she pulled out a small notebook, her trademark tool that had documented countless restaurant reviews over the years. The leather cover was worn, its pages filled with observations that had launched careers, and occasionally ended them. She began to write, occasionally glancing up to observe James's interactions with other guests, the warm handshakes, the enthusiastic welcomes, the personal attention lavished on those he deemed worthy. Little did James Barrett know that this unassuming woman in worn clothes was about to change not just his restaurant, but his entire worldview. 30 minutes passed as Sarah sat patiently on the hard wooden bench, observing the restaurant's operations with practiced ease. She watched as 3 different parties without reservations were promptly seated at pristine tables, each receiving James's elaborate welcome speech about the Golden Plate's prestigious history. The young server, Emily, had managed to secretly slip Sarah a glass of water, earning a stern glare from James. Sarah noticed how Emily's hands trembled slightly as she walked away, torn between compassion and job security. In her notebook, Sarah jotted down, "Staff shows humanity despite management's example." Finally, James approached Sarah's corner, his polished leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. A couple at a nearby table paused their conversation to watch the interaction unfold. "Miss," he began, his voice carrying just loudly enough for nearby diners to hear, "I notice you've been waiting quite a while. I feel it's only fair to inform you that our entrees begin at $75, and we have a strict dress code policy." He gestured to her worn sneakers with a practiced look of concern. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I understand, Mr. Barrett. Would you mind sharing where your dress code policy is posted? I'd love to review it for future reference." James's confident demeanor faltered for a moment. There was no posted dress code. Several regular customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly very interested in their water glasses. "It's an understood policy," he recovered, straightening his designer tie. "We cater to a certain caliber of guest who appreciates fine dining." His emphasis on certain hung in the air like heavy perfume. Sarah wrote in her notebook, "Management creates arbitrary rules to justify selective service." She noticed how the afternoon sun streaming through the windows caught the gold leaf ceiling details, a beautiful restaurant tarnished by ugly behavior. The business lunch was wrapping up at a nearby table, and Sarah overheard snippets of their conversation about a multi-million-dollar merger. One of the executives, wearing a suit similar in quality to James's, pulled out a membership card for an exclusive dining club. "James," the executive called out, "wonderful lunch as always. Say, this lady's been waiting quite a while. Surely you can find her a table." His tone was friendly, but carried a note of challenge. James's face flushed slightly. "Mr. Richardson, I was just explaining to this person that we have certain standards. I can pay in advance if that would make you more comfortable," Sarah interrupted softly, pulling out her wallet. The restaurant had gone eerily quiet, with only the gentle clinking of cutlery breaking the tension. Emily, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. "Sir, table 7 just opened up. I could clean it right away." Her voice quavered slightly, but her chin was raised in quiet defiance. James turned to Emily, his expression darkening. "That table is reserved for—" "For whom?" Sarah asked, flipping through her notebook. "I've been observing for 30 minutes, and no one has claimed any reservations." Her accent had slipped slightly, but James was too flustered to notice. The tension in the room was palpable now. Other diners were openly watching, some recording discreetly with their phones. James Barrett stood at a crossroads, his carefully curated image of exclusivity crumbling in real time, unaware that his next words would soon be broadcast to millions. James Barrett's moment of decision was interrupted by commotion at the restaurant's entrance. The heavy oak doors swung open, revealing a camera operator with professional equipment, followed by a sound technician holding a boom microphone. A producer wearing a hidden plates crew jacket stepped in, tablet in hand. "Sarah, there you are," the producer called out cheerfully. "Sorry we're late for the shoot. Traffic was terrible." The color drained from James's face as recognition dawned. He looked back at Sarah, who was now standing, her posture transformed. Gone was the slight hunch of uncertainty. In its place was the confident bearing of a woman who'd spent 15 years building one of the most influential platforms in the culinary world. "Hello, James," Sarah said, her accent now perfectly American. "I believe you were about to make a decision about my seating arrangement." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. The notebook in her hand suddenly seemed less like a diary and more like a record of evidence. Emily, the young server, had pressed her hands to her mouth in shock. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're Sarah Chen. I watch your show every week." The other diners had also caught on. Mr. Richardson, the executive who had spoken up earlier, was barely containing his amusement. "Well, James," he said, "it seems your certain caliber of guest has quite a following." The camera operator had begun filming, capturing James's expression as it cycled through shock, embarrassment, and fear. His restaurant had been on the shortlist for a Michelin star, and Sarah Chen's reviews could make or break that dream. "Ms. Chen," James stammered, "there's been a terrible misunderstanding." Had you known it was me?" Sarah interrupted gently, you would have treated me differently." "That's precisely the problem, isn't it?" She gestured to her casual clothes. "My grandparents ran their noodle shop in Chinatown for 40 years. They served everyone from construction workers to bank executives, and do you know what they never did? They never made assumptions about what was in someone's wallet based on their appearance." The restaurant was silent now, every eye fixed on the scene unfolding before them. The sound technician's boom mic hovered overhead, catching every word. "Your carpaccio may be celebrated," Sarah continued, "but a truly great restaurant feeds more than the stomach. It nourishes the soul. It creates community." She turned to Emily. "Your instincts for hospitality are excellent. Never lose that." James stood frozen, watching as his carefully constructed world of exclusivity crumbled around him. The cameras caught everything. The trembling of his hands, the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his eyes darted between Sarah and the exit. "I'm not here to ruin you, James," Sarah said softly, though the microphones caught every word. "I'm here to help you see what you're missing. Your food is exceptional, but your heart—" She paused, looking around at the opulent dining room. "Your heart needs as much attention as your menu." The producer stepped forward. "We'd love to have a word with you about turning this into a teaching moment. Our viewers appreciate stories of growth and change." She held out a business card. "Your choice, of course." James looked at the card, then at Sarah, then at the cameras documenting his defining moment. In the background, Emily was still watching with hopeful eyes, and Mr. Richardson had leaned forward in his chair, waiting to see what would happen next. The next words out of James Barrett's mouth would either begin his redemption or cement his downfall. James Barrett slowly sank into the chair opposite Sarah, his usual commanding presence diminished. The cameras continued rolling, but Sarah made a subtle gesture to her crew to give them space. They stepped back, creating an intimate bubble in the midst of the busy restaurant. "Tell me about your first restaurant job," Sarah said, surprising everyone with her gentle tone. She closed her notebook and placed it on the table, giving James her full attention. James ran his fingers along the edge of the tablecloth, a nervous habit he thought he'd abandoned decades ago. "I was a dishwasher," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, "at a diner in Brooklyn. I was 15. "And how did they treat you there?" A faint smile crossed his face. "Like family. Mrs. Rodriguez, the owner." He paused, recognition flickering in his eyes. "She never turned anyone away. Even when they couldn't pay, she'd find a way to feed them." Sarah nodded, pouring water into 2 glasses from the pitcher Emily had left. "What changed, James? When did success start to taste like exclusivity?" The question hung in the air as other diners pretended not to listen, though every ear was tuned to their conversation. Emily had stopped pretending to clean nearby tables and stood watching openly, her order pad clutched to her chest. "I thought," James began, then cleared his throat. "I thought being exclusive made us special. The harder it was to get in, the more people wanted to be here." He looked around his restaurant as if seeing it for the first time. "But today, watching you sit in that corner, watching Emily try to do the right thing while I—" His voice cracked slightly. Sarah reached into her worn denim jacket and pulled out a faded photograph. "This was my grandparents' noodle shop," she said, sliding it across the table. The image showed a humble storefront with tables spilling onto the sidewalk, every seat filled with people from all walks of life. "They arrived in America with nothing but their recipes and a belief that good food brings people together," she continued. "They never became millionaires, but their restaurant changed lives. People who met at their shared tables became friends, business partners, even married couples." James studied the photograph, noticing the joy on every face. "We've had 3 wedding proposals here this year," he said quietly, "but I can't remember the last time I saw this kind of happiness." Mr. Richardson, who had been listening nearby, stood up and approached their table. "James, I've been coming here for 5 years. The food is outstanding, but today it is the first time I've seen the real you. The boy from Brooklyn who once dreamed of creating something special." Emily stepped forward, still clutching her order pad. "Sir," she said to James, "remember last Christmas when you let the staff bring their families for dinner?" The kitchen was chaos, kids were everywhere, but it was the best night we've ever had here. Sarah watched as James absorbed these words, seeing the walls of pretense crumbling. "Your skills as a chef are undeniable," she said warmly. "But perhaps it's time to nourish more than just the body. What if the golden plate became known not just for its food, but for its heart?" James looked at the photograph one more time before handing it back to Sarah. His eyes were shining with unshed tears, but his voice was steady when he spoke. I'd like that very much. But I don't know where to begin." Sarah smiled, finally seeing the man behind the facade. "That's why I'm here. Shall we begin?" The following week, the Golden Plate staff gathered before opening hours, the morning sun streaming through the windows casting long shadows across the polished floors. James stood before his employees, not in his usual designer suit, but in a simple chef's coat. Sarah sat quietly at a corner table, observing the scene unfold. "I owe each of you an apology," James began, his voice carrying across the quiet dining room. "Emily," he turned to the young server who had shown such courage, "your compassion showed me what true hospitality means. I've been doing it wrong for so long." Emily smiled encouragingly as James pulled out a stack of papers from a folder. "These are our new policies," he continued. "First, our dress code is simple now, clean and neat, nothing more. Second, we're introducing a community table program." The staff leaned forward with interest as James gestured to a beautiful long table being installed near the window. "This table will be reserved for mixing different groups, encouraging conversation between strangers, just like Sarah's grandparents' noodle shop." Sarah watched as the staff's expressions transformed from uncertainty to excitement. The head chef, Marco, stepped forward. "I have an idea too," he said. "Each month, we could feature a dish inspired by our staff's family recipes. My grandmother's Sicilian caponata, my mom's Korean bulgogi," added Lisa, another server. "Perfect," James smiled. "Our menu should reflect our community." The morning continued as the staff collaborated on changes. The sommelier suggested wine tastings that paired expensive bottles with affordable alternatives. The maitre d' proposed a system where regulars could sponsor meals for those who couldn't afford them. Sarah noticed James taking notes on everything, his hands slightly shaky, but his eyes bright with purpose. When the bartender mentioned creating a special mocktail menu so non-drinkers would feel equally welcomed, James actually teared up. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling out his phone. He pulled up the restaurant's accounting software. "I've been reviewing our numbers. Starting today, we're raising everyone's base pay by 20%. He held up his hand as surprised murmurs filled the room. "And we're implementing a profit-sharing program. This restaurant's success should benefit everyone who makes it possible." Emily, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, suddenly spoke up. "Could we also start a mentorship program for young people interested in the restaurant industry?" She blushed as all eyes turned to her. "Maybe partner with the culinary school downtown." James looked at Sarah, who nodded approvingly. "Emily, would you like to head that program?" he asked. The young server's face lit up with joy. As the staff broke into excited discussion groups, Sarah approached James. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. He gazed around at his transformed restaurant. The golden fixtures seemed warmer now, less ostentatious and more welcoming. "Lighter," he replied. "Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't even know about." Through the window, they could see the first regular customers arriving for lunch. Mr. Richardson was there, bringing with him a group of young entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. James straightened his chef's coat and walked to the door. "Welcome to the Golden Plate," he said, opening the door with a genuine smile. "Everyone is welcome here." He glanced back at Sarah. "And I mean everyone." Sarah beamed as she watched him lead the group to the new community table. In her years of reviewing restaurants, she had never seen a transformation quite like this. The Golden Plate wasn't just changing its policies, it was rediscovering its soul. 3 months after Sarah's visit, the Golden Plate hummed with a new energy. The evening sun painted the dining room in warm hues as a diverse mix of guests filled every table. The new community table, now nicknamed the family table, had become the most requested seating in the house. James moved through the restaurant, not just greeting guests, but truly connecting with them. He stopped at a table where a young artist was celebrating her first gallery showing, sitting down briefly to hear about her journey. At another table, a retired teacher was treating her former student to dinner, their conversation animated and joyful. "Chef," Emily called softly, approaching with a tablet. "The culinary students are here for their mentorship session." She now wore a badge that read Community Program Director alongside her server's apron. Under her guidance, the restaurant had partnered with 3 local culinary schools, providing hands-on experience to aspiring chefs from all backgrounds. In the kitchen, Marco was teaching 2 students how to prepare his grandmother's caponata, which had become so popular it earned a permanent spot on the menu. Next to them, Lisa's mother was demonstrating the proper technique for marinating bulgogi to another group. The kitchen rang with multiple languages and laughter. "Mr. Barrett," a familiar voice called. James turned to see Mr. Richardson with a group of international business clients. "Had to bring them here. Told them it's the only place in the city where the food feeds both stomach and soul." The restaurant's transformation had caught the attention of local media. A framed article on the wall told the story. "The Golden Plate, where luxury meets community." The piece praised not just the food, but the revolutionary business model that proved excellence and inclusivity could coexist. James paused at the host's stand, where a new plaque hung prominently. "All are welcome here," in elegant script. Below it, a small photo showed Sarah's grandparents' noodle shop. He smiled, remembering how different things were just 3 months ago. The changes hadn't always been easy. Some regular customers had initially bristled at the new atmosphere, preferring the old exclusivity. But for every guest who left, 3 new ones arrived, drawn by word of mouth and genuine recommendations. "Chef," Emily interrupted his thoughts, "remember that family from last week? The ones who couldn't afford to celebrate their daughter's graduation." She beamed. 3 different regulars have offered to sponsor their dinner. They're coming tomorrow night." The restaurant's books were healthier than ever. The combination of steady regulars, new customers, and reduced staff turnover had actually increased profits. But more importantly, the Golden Plate had become what Sarah had envisioned, a place where food brought people together. Near closing time, a young couple lingered at the family table, deep in conversation with an elderly man who had started as a stranger but was now sharing stories of his own restaurant adventures in the 1960s. James watched them exchange contact information, knowing that another connection had been forged under his roof. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Getting ready to air your episode next week. Just saw the final cut. You're going to inspire so many others." James looked around his transformed restaurant one more time. The golden fixtures still gleamed, but now they highlighted something far more precious than exclusivity. They showcased humanity, connection, and the simple joy of breaking bread together. He typed back a simple response. "Thank you for helping me remember who I really am." The evening of the Hidden Plates episode premiere, James transformed the Golden Plate's dining room into a viewing party space. A large screen hung where his pretentious art pieces once dominated the wall. The family table had been expanded to accommodate both staff and regular customers who had become part of the restaurant's new story. Emily darted between groups, serving appetizers she had designed herself, fusion dishes that told the story of her own mixed heritage. Her culinary students, now in their final month of the mentorship program, assisted with quiet confidence. 5 minutes until airtime, called Marco, emerging from the kitchen with a tray of his famous caponata bruschetta. The room buzzed with excitement as everyone found their seats. The show began with Sarah's characteristic warmth. "Tonight's episode is different," her voice narrated over footage of her initial visit. "It's not just about food. It's about transformation. James sat between Emily and Mr. Richardson, watching himself on screen with a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. The footage showed his worst moments, but also captured his journey. When the scene of his apology to the staff played, Emily squeezed his hand supportively. As the episode progressed, text messages began flooding in. Other restaurant owners, inspired by the transformation, wanted to know more about the community table concept. Culinary schools across the country expressed interest in similar mentorship programs. The show's final segment revealed something even James hadn't known. Sarah had tracked down Mrs. Rodriguez, his first boss from the Brooklyn diner. The elderly woman appeared on screen, her eyes twinkling as she talked about the young dishwasher who always dreamed big. "I knew he had it in him," Mrs. Rodriguez said in the footage. "Sometimes we just need reminding of who we really are." By the time the credits rolled, the Golden Plate's phone was ringing constantly. Reservations were pouring in, but not from people seeking exclusivity. They wanted to be part of something meaningful. Mr. Richardson stood up, raising his glass. "To James, who taught us that true luxury isn't about keeping people out, it's about bringing them together." The toast was interrupted by a commotion at the door. A group of local restaurant owners had arrived, inspired by what they'd just watched on television. They wanted to learn more about implementing similar changes in their establishments. James looked around the room, taking in the scene. His staff wasn't just employees anymore. They were family. His customers weren't just patrons. They were community members. The golden fixtures that once symbolized exclusivity now reflected the warm glow of genuine connections. Emily approached with her newest idea, a monthly dinner where restaurant owners could gather to share strategies for making their establishments more inclusive. "We could call it the Industry Family Meal," she suggested, her eyes bright with possibility. Sarah sent a message that appeared on the screen. "This is just the beginning. You've started a movement, James." As the evening wound down, a young girl who had been dining with her parents approached James. "Mr. Barrett," she said shyly, "I want to be a chef someday. Do you think I can?" James knelt down to her level, remembering the dishwasher from Brooklyn who once dreamed of owning a restaurant. "With heart and hard work, you can be anything," he replied. "And when you're ready to learn, the Golden Plate will be here for you." The restaurant had become more than a business. It was now a beacon of change in the industry, proving that success and inclusivity could go hand in hand. 1 year to the day after Sarah Chen first walked through its doors, the Golden Plate hosted a special celebration. The restaurant had been transformed for the evening, with tables arranged in a spiral pattern leading to the famous family table at the center, a symbol of how everything had come full circle. Sarah arrived early, wearing the same denim jacket from her undercover visit, though this time she was warmly embraced at the door. James led her through the restaurant, pointing out the changes that had accumulated over the year. A wall of photographs showcased graduating culinary students, community events, and candid moments of joy shared at the family table. "Remember when you sat in that corner?" James asked, gesturing to the spot where everything began. The uncomfortable bench had been replaced with a cozy reading nook, stocked with cookbooks from diverse cultures. "Best mistake I ever made, trying to hide you there." The evening's guest list told the story of the Golden Plate's transformation. Emily's first class of culinary students, now employed at restaurants across the city, arrived in their chef whites. Mr. Richardson brought his entire company for their annual dinner, having made the Golden Plate their official celebration venue. Mrs. Rodriguez, James's first boss from Brooklyn, had flown in specially for the occasion. The menu for the night was a collaboration between Marco, Lisa, and the graduating class of culinary students. Each dish told a story of heritage and innovation. Traditional recipes reimagined through fresh perspectives. The wine list, once exclusively high-end, now featured both prestigious labels and exceptional local wines, each chosen for quality rather than price. During dinner, Emily unveiled her latest project, a scholarship program for aspiring restaurateurs from underserved communities. funded by a portion of the Golden Plate's profits and contributions from inspired patrons. It would provide both education and mentorship. When I was hiding behind that plant, afraid to help Sarah, Emily shared, her voice strong with conviction, I never imagined I'd be standing here today. But that's what happens when someone believes in you. She smiled at James. You just need one person to see your potential. As dessert was served, James stood to make a speech. The room quieted, all eyes turning to the man who had undergone such a remarkable transformation. 1 year ago, I thought I knew what success looked like, he began. I thought it was about exclusivity, about keeping people out. Sarah showed me that true success is about bringing people in. He gestured to the diverse crowd before him. Look around. This is luxury. These connections, these stories, these moments we share, this is what makes a restaurant golden. The evening concluded with a surprise announcement. The Golden Plate had been awarded not only its long-coveted Michelin star, but also a special recognition for community impact. The judges had cited the restaurant's unique ability to maintain exceptional culinary standards while fostering genuine inclusivity. As the last guests departed, Sarah and James sat at the family table, sharing a quiet moment. Did you know this would happen? He asked her. When you walked in that first day. Sarah smiled, running her hand along the table's worn surface, smooth from countless elbows and animated conversations. I hoped, she replied. But you did something even better than I imagined. You didn't just change a restaurant, you changed minds. Through the windows, the city lights twinkled like stars. The Golden Plate sign glowed warmly, no longer a symbol of exclusivity, but a beacon of welcome. Inside, the golden fixtures reflected more than light now. They reflected the truth that greatness comes not from who you keep out, but from who you invite in.